So we're almost to the end of the selection tool. You can see right here we've gone all the way from erase and fill down through separate. Right now we're going to talk about plane cut, flip normals, and fit primitives. Plane cut I use all the time, both in this indication and the other plane cut indication or tool. Flip normals is very useful at times. Fit primitive I haven't used a lot, but as I was researching it to teach it to you, turns out I can think of some pretty nice indications for it that will come out over this course or other courses, but I'll show you an example of that, and we'll just kind of play around with it. So plane cut is a very useful tool in Mesh Mixer because it allows you to cut something and leave a perfectly flat plane behind. And I'll show you what I mean. And there is another, let me just point it out to you, there is another place to find plane cut, and it's right here in the edit menu. We're going to cover that in more detail later. But the problem with the plane cut is if I want to cut through this one ear like this, it's going to affect the entire model. See how it cuts the entire model? So I'm going to undo that. We're going to hit cancel. And we're going to go over. And let's say we just want to cut one of the ears off. Rather than cutting through the entire model, we can create a selection. So we can come through here and just select the one ear. And now under edit, if we go to plane cut, it's only going to affect the one ear. Okay, so notice right now it's showing me that it's actually going to delete these triangles, leave a flat plane right there, and leave a hole right here. I'll show you what I mean. See how that's not what we wanted. So undo. And with plane cut, you can notice one thing I just showed you but didn't say much is you can direct where your plane is by clicking and dragging this line. You can also use these tools here, but I find that it's much easier to just figure out where you want to cut and just drag like that. If you do that and you realize that you're too close to the bunny's head and you want to move away, you can either use these or you can just click somewhere and it'll hop to wherever. But right here, the problem I explained is this is going to be kept and a hole's going to be left here. This fat blue arrow you see right here, that flips the cut tool around. So now you can see we're going to cut off the side of the ear. Now there's a couple options in plane cut. One of them is to cut it and throw this away. Another one is to slice it, but to keep them both. And I don't ever play around. I'll figure that out by the time we get to plane cut. But we're going to choose this one, and then right here, this is talking about this. So you can either remesh the fill, you can do no fill, you can do a minimal fill, or a fixed fill. And again, we'll talk more about that later on. But right now, if I hit accept, you can see that I was able to cut the ear off without cutting through anything. So that's a useful tool right there. I'm going to adjust to undo, cancel, so we get back to our bunny. So then another tool that is useful, well, hold on, I'm going to do the flip normals last because I just want to show you something fun you could do with this bunny. But the other tool, the fit primitive ones, it's an interesting one, okay? And like I said, I haven't really done much with it. I'm going to double click and select the entire bunny, and we're going to come into where it says fit primitives. So you can notice what it's doing is it is taking an object, and there's a lot to choose from, and it's trying to position that object like in the center of your selection. And so because I had the entire bunny selected, it is taking this square and it's putting it right through the selection. Honestly, I haven't yet figured out a valuable use of that. You can change it to a rectangle. You can change it to, I'll go to the cylinder in a little bit. You can change it to a disc, okay? And you can change it to a sphere, okay? And notice it says sphere best fit. You can change it to a sphere from the plane, okay? Which makes the plane and then creates a sphere to it. Or you can do a cylinder. And this is one the cylinder one is one that made me think, oh, I have a use for that. And I'll explain that one later. And let's see, sphere from plane, did all these. These ones are a little bit trickier. You can see that it's creating like an outline. See how it's like taking an outline of my bunny, okay? And let me bring it down so you can see a little bit better what I'm talking about. See how it has the outline of the bunny, ears and all, right like that, all the way out to where the tail is. And you can change that to be in a different direction. Again, I don't know of a dental application for this kind of a tool, but sometimes once somebody sees a tool, they come up with an idea and it changes the way we do things. So it's definitely something to look at. I guess one I'm thinking of that might work is if you had a set of teeth and you did something like this, and because you wanted to create like a base underneath it, that might be an interesting way to create a base. I don't know. So that's the linear sweep where it's just in one direction. Convex hull is an interesting one because it's kind of like a shrink wrap, but it doesn't get into any of the details. So you can see like it's got the point of the ears and the nose. Over here is the tail and the sides of the hips. And so it just kind of like pulls everything in. They said in the manual that, you know, this might be a nice way to create like a box or something for an object, which is true, depending on what it is you're trying to do with it. But that's just kind of an interesting thing. And then this last one, height field. I remember playing around with this and thinking that it was kind of interesting if you pulled and made it parallel to the bottom of the bunny and pulled it down like this. I was just playing around with that because essentially what it seems to be doing is taking like I don't have a use for this. You know, if at one point I thought, well, maybe you could use that to work with undercuts, but it just doesn't really do that. It almost seems like it's trying to make supports. But, you know, it's interesting. So just like most things, this creates how much, let me turn on my wireframes. This messes around with the density of the meshes, okay? Depending on what you choose, I'm guessing that's going to change how it's managed. Creating a new object, if you check this and hit accept, it'll create whatever it makes. Instead of having it combined with your original, it'll make it as a separate one. The single primitives is interesting because, let me hit cancel. Let's say that we had different parts of the bunny. I'm going to hold down shift and grab that tail. Let's say you have two different sides of that bunny and then you do the fit primitives. Notice that it's trying to use each of those selections as its own. And so if you did like a cylinder, it's making two different cylinders. Well, if you click this, now it uses this selection and that selection to be able to create something. And an example that they gave in the manual that was interesting that can apply sometimes to like surgical guides is if you have a tube that has things connected on either side and you can't make a selection that goes all the way around the tube, but you want to fit a cylinder to it, you could select a little here and a little here, and it will try to fit that cylinder to the entire tube, even though you haven't selected it all the way around. But if you can't go all the way around with that selection and you just have this unchecked, then it's going to give you two cylinders. So that's kind of an interesting thing. I mentioned that there was one indication that I thought would be interesting is, let's say, and again, this isn't dentistry at this point, but we'll play around later with that. If you did that thing we did with the tube handle, okay, notice that it has this selection on the inside. Well, say that you're in dentistry, maybe you're making a surgical guide, maybe you have a screw axis hole that's going through a prosthesis and you want to fit a cylinder in there because you want to have a cylinder to play around with. This might be an interesting way. Like I already have some ideas on what it could be used for, But notice that I can select the inside of one cylinder and I can create a new cylinder by going into fit primitive and choosing cylinder. So notice what that's done is it's put a cylinder right exactly where I want it to be. So imagine this was like a screw axis hole and you want to go in and change the screw axis hole to a different diameter. You can first fit a cylinder, and then from here you can take that cylinder and transform it. You know, like right now it's 9 millimeters in diameter. I can make sure it's uniform scaling and I can change it to 6 millimeters. And so now you can see, and hold on, let's stretch it out a little bit. So let's say I've got this cylinder that was made inside an existing cylinder, which if it's a screw axis hole, it's gonna make it really probably exactly where it needs to be. Then you're gonna put this in, you're gonna change the size, and then you go back to your cylinder, you close the holes. So like for example, I'm gonna double click on this. I'm going to delete that. We're going to go into the inspector, do a smooth fill, and click here and click here. So let's say you have something like this. Oops. You have something like this, and let's say it's a crown with a screw axis hole, but you've changed the diameter. Now you can click on this and do a Boolean difference, and that's going to cut a hole right through the center of your crown, but it's going to put that at a different diameter. So that's just kind of an interesting use of that tool. All right, let's just undo this, and I'm going to delete that cylinder. All right, so then an interesting thing that we could do, I'm going to take away the face group there. Let's go to the last one that we want to talk about in this video, and that's the flip normals. We talked about this in one of the last videos where every triangle that you have has the the side of the triangle that's the right side, and then it has the inside outside. In Mesh Mixer, it's shown by, and last time I was talking about it, for some reason my colors weren't working, but you can see it here. On the outside it's gray and orange where it's selected, and on the inside it's pink striped, black and gray striped, black and gray where the selection is. And so that tells you which side is the right side, like the outside of your clothes, and which side is the inside, like the inside of your clothes. Sometimes you'll need to flip those around. So you can see this is not an indication where you would flip it around. I'm going to actually, and if you ever end up with an object like this, the only way to fix it would be to go and select all those different areas and then flip them around, which depending on your object could be very challenging. There is an indication that you'll see when we start basing models with the extrude tool in the way I like to do it, that it does turn STL inside out, so you have to use the flip normals to turn it around. Another fun indication of this, and there's a lot of times that this comes up, okay? You'll just have to trust me that there's a lot of times it comes up. But a fun indication is if we close this hole and then we go ahead and let's use our new tool. Let's use the fit primitives, and let's use that convex hole and create a new object, and we're going to hit accept. Okay, so we've got this object here, this primitive object, and then we're going to enlarge it bigger, okay, like this. So if you were to look inside, this is the see-through shader, you can see that that bunny's sitting on the inside, okay. I didn't mean to hit export, shade, let's put that back to the normal one, okay. So we have an outside thing. I just did that instead of making a cube, but I was going to bring in a cube and size it. But what I want to do is go into this bunny, select the entire bunny, and go with a flip normals. So the whole entire bunny is inside out, but then we have an STL that's on the other side of it. And if we select both of these and combine them, technically right now, if you print this out, you're going to end up with like a mold of a bunny. Okay, and if you went, and I know this isn't the right time to use it this way, but if we select the entire thing, and normally I wouldn't do that, I would just go to the edit and do plane cut. But if you come through like this, Okay. And change this to slice, keep both, remeshed fill, and accept. What you have, we're going to do expand to connected and separate. So now, if you pull this off to the side, and let's turn our wireframes off, notice what we have is, and I mean, I probably didn't cut that in the best spot that it should have been cut, but you have this mold that technically you could, you know, print something like this and, I don't know, fill it with chocolate, and when the chocolate sets, I mean, you'd have to print it out of a flexible material, but, you know, that's just something to show that that bunny that started with the normals going outward, when we flipped it around and put it on the inside of an object, now suddenly the inside of the object became a surface, and by embedding it in another object, you can do some fun things with it. And I've done things like this before, okay, in some complex indications where you want to take something. At one point, we're going to be in the edit tools, and we're going to look at something called hollow. Hollow is a way, is like an automatic way of taking an object and then creating a surface, an STL, on the inside of that object, but with the normals flipped around so that it makes the inside of the object hollow. And you'll see that when we do, when we get to the dental applications and we're looking at hollowing out a model. And so that's hopefully, let me just go back into our list. Hopefully that gives you a good indication of when you would use plane cuts and when you would use this one versus the other plane cuts tool. And also give you a good introduction into flipping normals, but also, you know, get your mind going on fitting primitives. So in the next video, I want to cover the target stuff.